Good morning. My name is David Bose. I'm the Communications Director for Washington Policy Center, and you're joining us for one of our solution series, our virtual solution series, which we have every Wednesday, particularly during this COVID-19 crisis. Started off as a special series of events, and they've grown in popularity, so we've tried to follow them up each week with information that you need and is helpful to us to promote better policy in Washington State. Today, we're joined by two state representatives, as well as our small business director, Mark Harmsworth, who you see on the screen now. We are joined by Representative Mike Chapman from Port Angeles area. He's the 24th Legislative District, and Representative Alex Ybarra of the 13th Legislative District. They will join us here momentarily. The way it's going to work is I am going to give a brief introduction, as I'm doing now, and then Mark Harmsworth will give some opening remarks. Then he'll come back to me and we'll start asking questions of the representatives after they make a couple of opening remarks as well. So brief opening remarks, and then it's mostly about you, what your questions are for them. There's a question function on the right-hand side of your screen as part of the GoToWebinar tools. That's the easiest way to ask a question. Just type into the question box there on your screen, or you can email me at dbose, that's D as in David, B as in boy, O, Z as in zebra, E as in egg, dbose at washingtonpolicy.org. And I'll be collecting those questions and following up with the representatives and Mark Harmsworth after the event. Also, I'd like to point out on June 10th, we now have a special event coming up with our Environmental Center Director, Todd Myers. And that event is going to be part of our virtual series, and it's about whether science matters to politicians anymore. And we'll have some details on that a bit later on in this broadcast. So you should save the date, June 10th, and be ready for that. With that, Mark, we're months into this economic retraction because of COVID-19. Obviously, there's a lot of other things going on that are also having an impact on the economy right now, but it seemed like things were starting to creak back into gear, and the economic engine was going to start moving again. Where are we at, and what needs to happen now? What do you want to open up when it comes to the concepts of what this whole webinar is going to be about?
Well, and thanks for hosting us today, David. Appreciate it. We're at a unique time in obviously the world's history, but particularly here in Washington State. As many of you know, we've just moved from the stay home, stay healthy recommendations from the governor's office to getting back to work, and those restrictions are starting to ease on some of our businesses now, but there's still a lot that needs to happen. And so we're in effectively we're starting to move into phase 2 for the larger of the counties. Many of the smaller counties are already in the phase 2 of the plan, which allows limited business opening. And we're in a critical phase because we're starting to figure out how to get our businesses open while still operating safely to prevent any further spread of the pandemic, and still make money, because it's a struggle. Because if you're a retailer where you're on razor thin margins and you're having to limit folks in your store, it's very difficult to find that balance between the number of people you want to bring back on staff full time and those that will need to stay at home, at least for now, until things ease up further. You think about the restaurant business and how that's going to happen. They've got to restock their food, and they've got to restart their menus. A lot of the material that was thrown out at the end of February when things closed down, beginning of March, that's gone to waste. So there's a lot of upfront costs here, plus the impact of COVID-19 on our businesses being shut down for so long. The CARES Act, which is the money that the federal government supplied for us, has certainly helped, but there's also some reluctance by businesses to take that on, because that only lasts for 8 weeks. You have to spend it for 8 weeks. And since we've been in lockdown for so long, one of the first to lock down and potentially even one of the last to reopen here fully, we're extending that period. And so that money doesn't cover the full payroll for some of these small businesses. And so, if they bring people back on, are they going to have to let them go? And these are the questions that we're going to see sort of play out in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Snohomish, King, and Pierce counties, the three largest counties, are still in phase 1, although all three are now applying to move to phase 2. So we'll see how that plays out. Some other counties and the representatives we have with us today are from varying different areas, so they're going to give us a perspective of what's going on in some of the other counties across the state and how they've already moved to phase 2 in some cases and are dealing with that. So I'm very interested to hear their opinion on how they feel things are going already in these smaller counties and what we can be doing as a state to help those small businesses and stay out of the way so they can get back to work and start hiring their full complement of employees and making sure that they're bringing money back to the state so we can get things rolling again and the critical services that we need as a state and get those businesses profitable and rebuild some of the dreams that have been either put on hold or lost right now. And there are several businesses that we may not see come back. That's unfortunate that this happened this way, and I hope that there's some things that we can do there to maybe restart them in a different form in some way. But needless to say, there's a lot going on here in the next few months, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today as we walk through this. David.
Well, let's bring the state representatives on for some brief remarks and about what or how the economic retraction has impacted their communities and what they're seeing now in terms of where they're at in the reopening process. Let's start with Representative Mike Chapman. He is from the Port Angeles area, the 24th Legislative District. Representative Chapman.
Thanks, Dave. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sound great.
Well, hey, thanks for hosting this today. It's an honor to be able to participate. Just really quick, I represent the North Olympic Peninsula, all of Jefferson County, Clallam County, and most of Grays Harbor County. Prior to serving in the legislature, I served 16 years as a Clallam County commissioner. So unfortunately, this will be the third recession that I've had the experience of governing through, having governed through the 9/11 recession and then the Great Recession. Also, I think if anything that what we saw earlier this year is especially in small business, but business in general, going into January and February, things were moving at a nice high rate of speed, and businesses were doing well. My wife owns a small business, and what we saw with the stay-home orders was, in essence, hitting a brick wall, and a lot of her business just dried up virtually instantly. And so there's been a lot of pain with small businesses as we just went from, in essence, probably the best economy in the nation among states to right now one of the worst. And we have an unemployment rate, especially in a district like mine, that is, it's Great Depression era unemployment. I think if there's one, just for an opening comment, I'm grateful that Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, the big box retailers were able to stay open. They were deemed essential. But if you run a small business and you're the primary or a major breadwinner in your family and you were told you were not essential, if you're the primary breadwinner, you're pretty essential to your family. And I think what happened was you could go to Walmart and buy a bike to get exercise, which we were told to get out and get exercise. But there's a couple of bike shops in my district. You couldn't take your bike if you currently owned one and get it repaired, get a flat tire fixed. Hundreds of people were walking through Walmart and buying things, but the small businesses in the small towns that I represent were told you're not essential. And those small businesses were the primary breadwinner for their family, and they were providing services that the communities rely upon. So if we learned anything, let's never use the term essential versus non-essential, because again, I'll say if you own a small business and you're the primary breadwinner, you're pretty essential. And I think that's a lesson I learned as a county commissioner when we had to do some budget cuts. We claimed essential workers were off limits for layoffs and non-essential. And I heard about that for a decade after we made that decision in the 9/11 recession. That hurt a lot of employees' feelings. And I think this phrase of essential and non-essential, every time I hear that, it just really bothers me. But we should have allowed small businesses to practice the same social distancing and the same requirements that we allowed the big box retailers. finally, small businesses in small towns, they're not going to get 100 people through their door. The small bike shop, this time of year might have gotten 5. And I think that it would have been more than easy to keep the doors open, let people come in and out, drop the bike off at the counter, let the person know, hey, I need a flat tire fixed, I need a chain. That could have kept that business going. And then finally, with the unemployment insurance catastrophe, a lot of these small businesses, and I have so many in my district, and I know so many personally, they've never been paid. They got caught up. And so we were able to pay the Nigerians, but we haven't been able to pay our small businesses. Now, how that happened is going to be an interesting story. But at the end of the day, I pretty much can guarantee you the Nigerians were never paying B&O tax. We're never registered with the Secretary of State's office. We're never registered with local government. And every small business has a track record of income. If they have any kind of history of income to the state, taxes paid to the state, that could have been verified. They have a Secretary of State registration and a business license, and then a lot of local business licenses. So somebody had better explain to me how my local small businesses couldn't get the federal program that they deserved, but we could pay the Nigerians, and that's not been asked. I've not heard anybody mention that a small business is registered with the state, that it would not have taken much effort at all to verify. And if anything, I'm really frustrated. We shut the small businesses down. A lot of them, thousands of them, have not been paid, and we deem them unessential. So this has been a triple whammy if you owned a small business, and an egregious error on the state of Washington. And as a representative, I take full responsibility for not maybe doing more. I think I've done as much as I could, wrote a lot of letters to the governor asking him to make some policy adjustments, but I certainly understand that leadership is about taking responsibility. So I apologize on behalf of all the small businesses in my district and around the state that we did not treat you right during this circumstance. So look forward to your questions. Thanks for having me today.
I'm glad you used the bike as an example. That is literally what I'm facing. I've got a flat tire on my bike, and I realize there's no place to get it fixed. Let's go to Representative Alex Ybarra. Representative, he is with the 13th Legislative District. Thanks so much for joining us today. Give us the overall situation of your district. How have they been weathering the challenges that we're facing right now, and just basically where your district's at when it comes to reopening as it now stands?
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me to this event. Very happy to be here and tell you we have a really unique district. So I don't know if you know my district, District 13. We go from Snoqualmie past I-90 all the way through Kittitas County, which is Ellensburg. You cross the Columbia River to Greene County, and then all through Lincoln, all the way to 5 miles out of Spokane. So I'm 275 miles long district. Mostly farm workers, mostly farmers, mostly ranchers, a lot of small little towns. And our towns were like uniquely hit just because, unlike Representative Chapman's district, because of all the farmers and farm workers, they were essential. So right now, like Yakima is getting hit with the COVID virus and stuff really hard, is because the essential workers, which are the farm workers, are all still working. Nobody really stopped working. We had maybe 10% unemployment here. Usually it's like 5, and we went to 10 just because all the companies in town are farm or food associated. The problem with that wasn't so much, the problem was that everybody's still working and everybody's still intermingling because they're at work. And so we got hit really hard with COVID. My little town of Quincy, within 2 weeks of me arriving back from session back March 15th, by the first week in April, we had 45 cases, and we only have a town of 7,000. At 45 cases, and the reason I'm bringing this up is 45 cases off the bat, and we were obviously in major danger of just going crazy with the COVID virus. So what happened, the town leaders got together, the city council, the mayor, the health departments, the hospitals, myself, the clinics, the migrant clinics all got together to try to solve the problems. From a small business standpoint, after I won't go into a story about the farm workers and how we cured that because it's kind of a long story, unless we get some questions on it. But what happened after we kind of solved the farm worker issues and the COVID kind of started dropping for us because of the things that we instituted in town, then we started working on small business. So as being in a small town, we contacted every 392 businesses, no matter who they were, figured out who's called them all up, because it's a small town, you can do that. We knew everybody, and called them up and asked them, just give them a survey and kind of said, okay, how is this COVID-19 affecting you? And just gave them, there's about 6 or 7 questions. What are you doing? Are you going to go out of business? And they would tell us. And so we contacted every one of those. And as we went from phase 1 to phase 2, we contacted the essential or the non-essential businesses and asked them, okay, you're going to go to phase 2. So we worked with them and the health district to try to get them safety rules in place and safety PPE that they need in their businesses before you go to phase 2. So we worked really hard with 93 businesses that were deemed non-essential to open up when the governor said it was okay to open. So we're doing okay, but those 93 businesses are really struggling because they're just getting back on their feet again. But it's been a real struggle, and we're still really struggling with getting a lot of coronavirus cases. We're up to, I think, my town, 82 cases in my town. So per capita, we are the epicenter, even bigger than Yakima and bigger than Seattle. Per capita, my little town has more cases per 100,000 than anybody else in the state. So we really had to dig down and support our small businesses. And it was like a leadership thing, and the whole town participated. So when we get to a little more input, I'll give you all the details if you guys would like to hear it.
Thank you very much. It's an interesting thing. One thing I've noted, Mark, is that here we are talking with 2 state representatives, and we're showing just how different Washington State is. And one of the challenges of Washington Policy Center, one of the goals is to represent the entire state and to advocate for good policy throughout the entire state. And there's so much diversity in the state, geographic and population density, the kinds of jobs and economic communities that we have some unique challenges here. What are your thoughts on how Washington State has adapted to the diversity within the state? Or do you think that our general approach to both the reopening and the economic retraction to begin with was it too much of a one-size-fits-all kind of approach? What's your overall assessment?
Yeah, I think initially the approach that we took was too much one-size-fits-all, and we could have moved to a more regional approach. And even at the county level, you've still got sort of geographical areas. The 3 big counties on the west side, and maybe in Thurston County as well, and Whatcom County. But the counties in Eastern Washington have very unique profiles, if you like, from a working perspective. As Representative Ybarra mentioned, you've got a lot of agriculture in the Yakima area, a lot of farming, and so those folks are, they had to go back to work, stay at work actually during this whole thing, and so they were exposed. And so focusing on making sure that they had the right PPE equipment was really important right up front. And as we've moved through this, I think we've nuanced the approach. I think there's still more to be done, but there are also some key principles that we just need to apply across the board. When we start, although the guidance that's come out from the governor's office has been helpful per sector, we also just need to let some of these businesses do their jobs. I mean, these business owners are fully capable of understanding what it means to have 6 foot apart, what it means to keep their employees safe, what it means to keep their customers safe. So giving them guidelines like that, and then trusting these business owners to do the right thing, is really important. That's the direction I think we should be taking now, is as we move through these phases, is just having a very light touch. Just here's the recommendations. We're here to give you support from the state. But businesses go at it and start making the right choices to keep your business profitable. If we think about, I'll talk about the retail side of things again. The bicycle store is a good example that Representative Chapman brought up, because it's a relatively controlled environment. You're not going to get 300 people show up in your bike store. But there's other retailers that will open that will have a much higher demand, and so they're going to have to be a little more careful and balancing the number of employees they need to manage that without having to overspend on employee salaries up front is going to be critical. So back to light touch, let the businesses do the right thing. And we've just recently heard about L&I coming in and starting to talk about finding businesses that aren't following the rules. I think that's not going to be helpful because a lot of these businesses right now are teetering on profitability or not profitability, and having L&I come in and with a heavy hand is going to be very difficult for them. So there's a level of trust that we need to have with our small businesses here that I think is important.
For those of you watching or listening, you can ask a question via the question function on the GoToWebinar toolbox on the right-hand side of your screen. Just type it in there, and we'll collect these questions and continue to ask them throughout this broadcast. Also, if it's easier for you, you can email me at dbose@washingtonpolicy.org. It's D as in David, B as in boy, O, Z as in zebra, E, dbose@washingtonpolicy.org for your questions. Mark, and this is for all of you, but we'll start with you, Mark. What specifically should we be doing to help restart things quickly now that we've started the process of opening up? We've kind of moved away. The whole phase system just disappeared seemingly overnight. What are the specific or are there specific things, or should the state just get out of the way? What do you see as the steps needed?
I think the state's done some things already to help, but the deferral on the B&O taxes and the deferral on having to file all these different things lets businesses refocus on getting their doors open. And we need to continue doing that and just basically stay out of the way, because you don't want to distract the small business from just trying to figure it out. The restaurants are going to be out trying to restock their fridges. The retailers are going to be reopening the doors, maybe restocking some of their materials or bring it back out of storage or whatever it is they need to do. And they just need to better get on with it. So anything the state can do to ease regulations, to give some additional time for the usual filings that need to happen every month. I'm a small business owner myself, and I know that I probably spend 3 or 4 hours a month just filing reports to the state and paying my taxes, and it's only 3 or 4 hours, but if that's 3 or 4 hours is going to be the difference between you being able to do employee payroll or figure something else out, that's going to be really important that the business owners can, once they got back on their feet, can worry about telling the state exactly what's going on. And back to those business regulations, anything we can do to suspend or relax that. A specific example, maybe sign ordinances in a local municipality, allowing businesses that normally wouldn't be able to put a banner on themselves saying, hey, we're open for business and please come in. Those types of things would be really helpful to help small business get going again.
Anything you'd like to add, representatives? We'll start with Representative Ybarra.
Sure, yeah. So like I was telling you, we're small towns. What happened as soon as phase 2 came in, we contacted most of the restaurant owners to see how they were doing, the Quincy team. And we asked them, are you guys going to open up? When, and are you guys ready? And what I'd say out of 95, or not 95 businesses, but there was probably 25 restaurants that wanted to open. More than half of them, probably about 13 or 14, said that opening up with a 50% occupancy was not feasible for them. So it was better for them to stay closed. So that's kind of where it's sitting. We have some restaurants that are open and some aren't just opening because they know it's not feasible for them to do it. So we, as the town leaders, wrote a letter to the governor through the chamber and basically said, hey, we know what you're doing. We'd love to, that we're going in phases and we want to be safe. But can you change the restriction from 50% occupancy in restaurants to about 75%? That way, all the restaurants can open as long as we keep our safe distances and, use the PPE that everybody's using. We want to get to that 75% or so because that's where all businesses, all restaurants can open. So we sent that letter off, I think, on Friday and went to the governor's office. So the little town is just asking for that little opening so we can get all the restaurants open, not just some of them.
Representative Chapman?
I think the comments that covered it. I do support the idea of a holiday, as it were, on B&O. I think businesses, if they get any income in right now, it's just trying to make up some of the losses that they've experienced already. So the insult to injury would be a little bit of income in May and June, and then have to file a B&O report when really you had nothing in March and April. So I serve on the finance committee and in the House, and we've been having some caucus meetings. I think that's an idea that hopefully we can move forward with. I think it's something the governor could put in place as well. I'd love to see a little more, and I also agree with Mark, the idea that L&I is now stepping in. That is just okay, step in, maybe explain, but I think there's an argument that a lot of these small businesses, and maybe are excited to try to get back their livelihood, and so maybe they're going to violate technically some rules. This is not the time to be fining businesses. This maybe educate if there is something egregious. Education is fine. The other thing that I heard that has been really distressing is some of the lawsuits that have been filed by the Attorney General's office. People and we're seeing this around our nation right now. People who are desperate, they need to provide for their family, and really, you're going to sue a small business because maybe they were trying to keep food on their food on their table as they weren't getting help from the government. Man, that just is that has also been distressing. So I'd like to see a moratorium without it being egregiously illegal, not illegal in the midst of the pandemic, but other, just lawsuits when people are trying to provide for their family just seems very distressing to me. Fine. So I would ask the state government to have a light touch. I would expect that the governor should make that proclamation anytime soon, because I think that again, so many small businesses, there's a fear many of them won't come back, and they're hanging by a thread. So they are pretty essential in our small towns.
Well, let's continue this line of thought here. There's a question. This is directed toward the representatives, although I'm sure, Mark, you'll have some comments as well. Do you think we need a special session? And if so, what should the focus of that session be, Representative Chapman?
I do. I have for some time. To his credit, House Republican leader Representative Wilcox put out a letter last night asking for 2/3 signatures to call a special session to bypass the governor. I signed that as a member of the other party. I thank him for his leadership on moving that issue forward. I've strongly supported a special session. There was a great editorial in Seattle Times. I hope people saw it over the weekend. The Speaker of the House had a really good point when she said the longer you wait, the deeper the cuts. Having governed through 2 recessions, not at the state level, but at the local level, we took swift action quickly, early, but it took 3 years. We were making cuts for a 2 and 3 year period after 9/11 and after the Great Recession. There's a lot of legislators who may not have ever governed through, certainly at the state level. Most of the legislature has never gone through a recession. We've had such great economic times for the last 10 years. And maybe have never governed through a recession at the local level. And I'm telling you, they don't know what's coming. They don't know how difficult this is going to be. And the longer we wait, and there's a whole lot of increases that are kicking in July, which is just going to mean deeper cuts, deeper layoffs, deeper cuts to services that people need. And if we wait until January, so I'm more than supportive. I think we are derelict in our duty if we are not making some decisions now before, I don't know the full number, but I'm sure it's hundreds of millions of dollars of increased spending comes in. And yes, so yes, long answer, yes, I do support a special session, and I have for some time.
Representative Ybarra?
Yes, I support one as well. So JT, Representative Wilcox submitted that letter. The Republican caucus in the House discussed it for many hours about, what are we going to focus on if we do go to special session? And so it's also a timing thing. So the revenue forecast is coming out, I think, on the 17th, and Representative Chapman, help me out on the date if that's not correct. But I think on the 17th, we'll know at that time officially how much we're going to be in the hole. And then if it's, let's say, 4 billion, or it's 7 billion, or it's 10 billion, or it's 15 billion, then we can start really focusing on what is going to be cut or what we have to do. Obviously, those are really big numbers, lots of big cuts that have to happen. And whatever that number is, it will be dependent on that forecast on the 17th. So we're hoping for that special session soon after that, so we can start making, like you said, get there early, make the decisions. There's, I think the state employees have a raise coming up July 1st. And that's going to be, I don't know the exact amount, but it's like maybe $400 million worth of raises for the state employees. So that's going to be on the table, I'm guessing. And we'll be discussing whether we go forward with that. So the sooner we get to special session, we can potentially, that could be one of the items that we look at, maybe not pushing forward. And I think there's a lot of legislation that's coming and opening up July 1st or so. So it'd be nice to try to save some of the money that we plan on saving, even though those bills passed in the last session. So
it's interesting. Two bills that I sponsored and that passed during the short session, widely bipartisan. They both passed the House unanimously and virtually unanimously in the Senate. One was a B&O extending a B&O preferential rate for our mills on their use of hog fuel. It was current policy, and what it would do is, instead of expiring in 2024, it would extend out. That bill was vetoed, even though it had no benefit to the budget or no impact on the budget, because it is current policy. Another bill that I had is auto dealers. When they have cars for sale, you'll see sales that say manufacturer's cash discount of $500 or $1,000. So a year and a half or so ago, so that's pass-through money. The auto dealer gets the money back. They have to give it to the customer. And in fact, the auto dealers often don't even get a check back from the manufacturer. What they get is a discount off of the bill the manufacturer will send them when they get their new influx of vehicles. Anyway, the state has determined about a year and a half ago that was a taxable event. That was income. So we had a bill that said, no, that's not income. It's just pass-through money. And in fact, it's not even a check that's coming in. It's just money taken off the bill the manufacturer sends the auto dealers. It passed unanimously. That bill was vetoed as well. So if we're going to veto bills that had virtually up until a year and a half ago, that manufacturers pass-through cash wasn't taxed, the hog fuel preferential rates already in law. If we're going to veto those bills, which I was really upset about, because those are good bills for my district, for our state, and good policy. If we're going to veto those, and we're not going to come in before hundreds of millions of dollars of pay raises kick in, because during the veto message we were concerned about the budget, then this isn't serious governing. This is partisan politics at the worst level, in my opinion. We need to come together, and the Seattle Times has really kind of put a blueprint together for a bipartisan. This is the time for bipartisanship. This isn't the time where Democrats have the answer and Republicans have their answer. This is the time where we work together, and we can do this. If we don't do this at this time, then I think the state is not being well served by their legislature and by their government. And if this continues to devolve into a partisan fight, the problem is too big. Small businesses are neither Republican or Democrat. They're just breadwinners for homeowners and breadwinners trying to employ people. So this is not the time for partisan politics. So, yep, we vetoed those bills. They would have had negligible impact on the budget, negligible, but they had to be vetoed because we had to. But now we're not going to really address the big spending increases that are coming. So that's my, frustrating from a rural district. It doesn't pass the good government test, and it wouldn't be something that we would do at the local level by any stretch.
Mark, anything to add?
No, I think they've summed it up perfectly. It is the right time to just look at the situation from a nonpartisan perspective. And it's really important that we do what's right for the residents and our small business in our state, and just make it happen. We don't have time to mess around.
We have a lot of questions coming in via the question function. It's in the toolbox on the right-hand side of your screen. Go to webinar toolbox there, type in your question, and we'll continue to get through those. We'll try to get through all of those questions. You can also email me at dbose@washingtonpolicy.org. Next question is, Do either of you plan on introducing or supporting legislation to help restart the economy? And if so, what will that be? We'll start with you, Representative Ybarra.
So I sit on the education committee, and so even though that's not a small business thing, it's going to be it's half our budget. And so whatever happens with education and however this coronavirus stays with us or goes away, it's going to be a big impact on the budgets and stuff. So I've been kind of really working not so much on the small business side in the legislature, but more on the education world to make sure that however we open in the fall, we do it well, and we do it to make sure our kids get the educations that they need. So that's been my focus in the interim, is mostly education and keeping our essential businesses around here, which are, we have dams around here and lots of folks work in those dams, and we want to keep those guys employed and keep electricity going too across the state because we do have cheap electricity. So that's been my focus. I don't have any legislation at the moment that I'm planning on moving forward. We're just talking about that right now. So there's a group of 128 educators that are trying to decide and to figure out which direction we push schools to. Do we open? How do we open without? How do we open in the fall, being safe, or how do we not open? And how do we teach our kids to, to learn to get an education properly? So,
Representative Chapman.
Yeah, so I represent a district that has had consistently the second highest unemployment rate in the state, and often is right around double digits. So going into this pandemic, we were still bumping up around 8-9% unemployment. So for the 4 years I've been in the legislature, restarting the economy has been my #1 focus. A number of pieces of bipartisan legislation that I've introduced have either passed the House, and some have actually made it through the bill signing process. The 2 bills that I mentioned obviously were something that were important, keeping our mills operational. I've worked really close and worked to help BIAW, the Building Institute of Washington, reopen home construction, and signed a letter, worked hard to get that when they were shut down initially. Introduced legislation last session to delay the implementation of the state energy code, because we hear a lot about affordable housing, and we continue to drive the cost of housing. That bill didn't go anywhere, but I think that's another issue that we should look at. So I think I have 3 bills that I worked on last session to help the rural economy, that 2 were vetoed and one didn't make it out of committee, that I think we need to take a second look at. And then finally, I like the idea, if we don't get order from the governor, I think we need legislation to delay B&O increases. The other thing that I think is going to be is scaring the heck out of small businesses is there are a lot of small businesses in this state that have had a perfect track record with regards to layoffs. Never had a claim, always managed their workforce, didn't lay off people, and now they basically, through no fault of their own, they were told to go home and lay everybody off, and they are scared to death that the increase of L&I because of their layoffs is going to hit their rate. And I think we're going to need legislation that says you're going to maintain the rate that you had before you went into this, where you were told by the government to lay everybody off. But I'm not, as I understand, there's some concern that L&I is going to be functionally, has some real functional fiscal problems just paying out the state claims. So I think that is going to be, I think that's something, if you're a small business owner, we're going to really need your help to make sure that when we come out of this and you bring everybody back, that all of a sudden your new L&I rates are not reflecting the fact that you had to lay off your 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 workers, not because you mismanaged your business, but because you were told you couldn't run it by government. So that, to me, is something that needs to be on everybody's radar screen. And if needed, if it's needed, that would be legislation that I would be introducing in a small session, so businesses don't have that hanging over their head too. Can you imagine if you're a small business owner, never had layoffs or managed it, worked really hard, you were told you can't run your business, and now your rate's going to go up?
Mark, any additional thoughts to add? I mean, I know you're not a legislator anymore, but any model legislation you'd like to promote?
Yeah, I think what I would be focusing on is some of the regulations, particularly around occupational licensing that we've got for folks that maybe have been laid off and are going to have to find a different vocation, going through some of those qualifications. And I'm not talking about doctors and nurses and some of the qualifications you need to operate safely, but when you think about HVAC installers, for example, we have a lot of occupational licensing rules around that right now that would prevent somebody from getting into that business relatively quickly and maybe kickstarting that. So I would be looking at what regulations could I ease or remove. I would definitely have a review of anything that was proposed new. And then in the occupational licensing space, I'd be looking at, are there any quick wins we can have here by suspending or delaying requirements for some of these industries where you can operate safely. Maybe you've got the experience, but it's in a different state and you've just moved to Washington and you were waiting to get into that. And so those are the types of things I'd be doing, get the government out of the way so that people can get back to work and maybe even start a new business.
Next question is, and this is for both representatives, is there legislation in the works to designate a state standard for essential business or critical infrastructure? And what might that look like?
I'm not aware of any legislation that's coming through at the moment. At least my caucus hasn't been talking too much about that legislation yet, about what particular legislation is coming through at the moment in order to do those things. So that's as much as I know about those legislations.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my earlier comment. I think everybody who runs a small business thinks they're pretty essential. And I think that, yes, I know we're talking generally about law enforcement and nursing, and we respect that work, and we pay that work, and they have great benefits, and they know they're in essence essential. But I think it's just a slap in the face if you're a primary breadwinner and you're running a small business and you're employing 3 or 4 or 5 people, and those 3 or 4 or 5 people are relying on you and your management of your business to provide for their family. I'm never going to say they're not essential. I made that mistake. I made that mistake at the county, and we deemed the police and the roads department, and we divided our courthouse through essential and non-essential. And like I said, for a decade, the next decade that I served there, every year at budget, I heard about it, like, well, who's going to be essential this year? And it quickly realized, you know what, you're all essential. Anybody in public service, anybody running a business, and we talked about it as a community. Everybody who's trying to make a living for their family is essential because there's a network of people around them that are relying upon them. So you're never going to hear me ever say one class of workers is essential and another class is non-essential. Once burned, I'm done with that argument. I just think everybody's pursuing what they want out of their life, and that's pretty essential. So,
well, I can assure you, I've been hearing an awful lot about that particular distinction myself too. So we can understand where you're coming from. There is this is a fairly lengthy question, and I think Representative Ybarra, we'll start with you on this one because your district was hit pretty hard by the COVID virus. This question says, we now know that only the 65 plus with underlying problems are in the serious danger, and it is possible to mobilize the National Guard to get provisions for the small part of the population who might need to stay shut in. So which is easier, most likely to succeed, mobilizing a few National Guard units or trying to demobilize an entire civilian population? I would like us to get smarter as a result of our experience and to never do this again. Do you agree with that sentiment? Was the shutdown a mistake?
No, I think the first month of the shutdown was what we needed to do. I think that most people didn't know what was going to happen, and everybody's really scared about what could happen. And so I think that the first month orders that came from the governor's office were needed. After that, there was a lot of questions about what we needed and what we didn't need. I think that like we talk about jobs and small businesses and what's essential, what's not essential. We're all essential, especially our old, the old folks over 65. I think that we can keep them safe, open up businesses, keep them safe, and come up with different ways of keeping them safe and keeping them in our society. We don't want to close them off and put them in their own rooms or anything. because they're our parents, they're our grandparents. And so we want to keep those guys in our society as best we can, but we want to keep them safe, and we want to keep all the businesses running, small businesses, because they're the ones that keep people alive. They're the ones that are giving all the people in your small towns jobs. They're the ones that are, that are paying for the uniforms for your little kid, for your little league teams. Those little small businesses are essential. So we got to keep those guys open, but keep them open safely and make sure that we have the right safety requirements to keep our folks over 65 safely. And I think most of the county health districts have been doing a really good job of coming up with the right type of health safety requirements needed to keep those folks safe. I think at the beginning we didn't do a very good job because nobody really knew what was going to happen. And so as soon as the health departments of the world started figuring it all out, I think that they are coming up with good safety requirements for our folks over 65. But no, I wouldn't bring in military or anything like that at all. I think we can do it on our own. And I think it's by county too. I've got, Yakima's got 1,000 cases. I've got 100 or 200. So our counties are completely different. We just have to manage them a little bit differently. Kittitas County had 14. Lincoln County has 10. So I'm not going to manage Lincoln and Kittitas and Grant the same as I do Yakima, because they're very different demographics, and we can all do it on our own by county, in my opinion.
Representative Chapman, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that this should have been more at the local level decision. The county I live in, Clallam, had very, very few cases, and I don't believe we've had a single case in Clallam that actually was originated here in Clallam. We had a few people bring it in, Jefferson County as well. Should we have, shut everything down? I think that we will study this for decades. I think what I've been most distressed about is that what we do know, and I represent a district that has been ravaged by homelessness, opioid addiction, and chronic unemployment. And the minute we were shut down completely out here, all I could think of was in scratching and clawing and trying to get things a little better over the last 20 years. I felt as if the wind went out of as if 20 years of my life just went poof. I've been in public service for 20 years and fighting for these things. And I knew instantly, we just took a 20-year setback on fighting opioid addiction, chronic unemployment, and homelessness. And my fear is that in a district like ours, like mine, the unemployment rate will not recover to under 10% for possibly a decade or more. The opioid addictions are already spiking. The homelessness is already increasing. And the number of folks that are living out of their car, I mean, it has been a noticeable increase. The other thing we did as a family is I have an 89-year-old mother-in-law, and the minute we knew this was a transferable disease, we locked her down. We didn't need the government to tell us how to protect her, and she hasn't left her home in months. We bring, people, we bring her the food, we maintain social distancing. We're not going to let her, she had to go to the doctor a couple of times, and we were able to do that safely. So in the meantime, people lost their jobs, and, God bless them. There's a lot of folks that have worked really hard, go through drug court, get off opioid addiction, they get a job. A lot of them are working in our small businesses, or a lot of restaurant workers. And, the minute they lost their job, I know. So we're going to study this for years, but I do know that in a district like mine, we just took a gigantic step back, and that's been for me, that personally, it's been very distressing. And I think we could have managed things in the county by county. We had very few cases, obviously different than other places, but we aren't going to have very few cases of increased homelessness, increased opioid addiction. The other thing too is I had people contact me. I know this doesn't get brought up, and I know we have more questions, but right after people got laid off, health insurance is going to run for another month. People were trying to get into doctor's appointments, and what did we do? We shut down doctor's appointments and dentist appointments. So while their health insurance ran out because they were unemployed and they didn't, if they couldn't keep COBRA, they weren't able. So how many long-term health problems did we create? And our local hospitals were have been bleeding millions of dollars a week because they were told they couldn't do routine surgeries. our local hospitals can totally manage that. They can look ahead and say, tomorrow we're not inundated in COVID crisis, but we can still do the routine surgeries. And they didn't have to lose the upwards of a local hospital in Port Angeles, upwards of $10 million a week, because they were literally told they couldn't, but they had massive capacity, empty beds. Again, this could have been managed by the local hospital. Has a pretty good idea of how to manage their caseload. And if they're ever too busy, they will cancel non-required surgery. So I just think we're going to study this for years, but in a district like mine, it didn't work real well, and it's set a lot of folks back that needlessly.
How will the state legislature shape the government's response if there's a reoccurrence of COVID-19 later this year?
Well, for me, I'd like to see a little more oversight on the proclamations that can just shut things down. So I'd like to see, maybe there needs to be, I've wondered, do we need to have some legislation that provides a little more oversight for the legislative process? I think people have been frustrated as they've contacted me, and all I could say is, hey, the governor made this proclamation. I think some more local authority would go a long way toward alleviating those concerns from the local citizenry.
Yeah, I agree with Mike totally. I think that the emergency rules that are deemed that the governor has are too far-reaching. I think he has too much control. One elected official. I think that it needs some legislative oversight from the Senate and from the House. Maybe not for everything, but for some of the bigger things. When he's closing everybody down, closing businesses, I think that needs more than just the governor's office making those major decisions, unless something blew up like a volcano or something like that. I think the governor has those emergency rules, but I think those emergency rules were meant for Mount St. Helens going off, or rock slides or floods, things that happen and only stay with us for maybe a week at the most, fires, things like that. But these emergency rules that he's governing with at the moment weren't meant for the long term. And so I think we're seeing the disbenefits of those emergency rules that are in place. So I think one of the things I'd like to bring back to the legislature is, just like Mike said, was to look at those rules and try to make some rules that make more sense under the circumstances. Because if we do go back to Corona again, we need to have a little more oversight, in my opinion, from the legislature.
And these are issues this isn't just, the office of governor is going to maintain whoever holds it. This is not necessarily, I mean, these are issues that we have to move forward. The other thing is that the power to instantly shut down the economy was there, but now to reopen, it's kind of this, all these steps, and you have to get local boards of health to sign off, and you have to get local boards of commissioners to sign off, and there have been these advisory groups that don't seem to be necessarily, that's been really convoluted. But so I think we need to have I think the public needed to be educated. And as we took steps, should have directed the local health department to say, hey, Clallam County, we don't have enough cases right now, but please social distance, be careful, keep elderly folks at home if you can. I mean, there was a better way to have done this without obliterating a rural economy that has been teetering on the edge for decades. And again, this just sets our rural economy back in a district like mine, just a huge step backwards.
The 3% pay raises were negotiated when the economy was doing very well, and they haven't gone into effect yet. So the question is, what is the overall feelings among your colleagues regarding these planned 3% pay increases? The impression I'm getting from the question is that if they were eliminated, it wouldn't actually be part of a cut, but would just be a reduced expectation. And it's something that the state can't afford now anyway. What are your thoughts on reopening those negotiations and based on the new economy that we face now, and those of your colleagues, I should add?
Yep.
Yeah.
So my caucus has been talking about those things. I think most of us are at the place where it's definitely on the table to try to use those funds that we haven't doled out yet to save them, because we're going to need those funds for something else, or we want to save that money, right? However much we're in the hole, that's going to be maybe about $400 million that we can that can fill that hole a little bit. So it's definitely on the table. It's something that that my caucus is probably going to be talking about a lot, and I'm guessing the Democratic caucus as well. And I think most legislators are on the same boat on that one.
It's a fact that if the raises go in, they were negotiated during stronger times, but if they go in, it'll be more layoffs of state employees down the road. That's just a fact. And so this is one of those times where you would hope that the unions would step forward and say, we want to work with you to avoid draconian deep layoffs, but it'll mean less. If those raises go in, it means less workers on behalf of the public doing public service. And there may be some folks that are like, if we have too many state employees as it is, that's an argument for another day. But there's a lot of key services. And the other thing is that the legislature is also supposed to receive the same pay increase. I was part of a bipartisan letter that went to the Salary Commission asking if they could be delayed. The Salary Commission replied, in essence, their hands are tied. There are some legal challenges, but that'd be something that I'd like to see at least the legislature vote to, and that'd be something I'd want to introduce in special session as a vote on delaying the legislative pay increases. Symbolic, yes, but I did it as a county commissioner, cut my pay as actually cut our pay and benefit package when I was a sitting county commissioner. Everybody's pay's been cut.
Yeah, given the choice between not getting a raise and potentially being laid off, I think it's pretty clear which direction you should potentially go. And a business owner, you're faced with these decisions sometimes, and they're hard. They're not easy decisions, but the state's going to be faced with this and potentially even more at some point. So I think it's like, as Representative Ybarra said, I think it needs to be on the table, and we need to consider that as part of the bigger picture.
Just have a couple of minutes left. The Washington Research Council states 70% of Washington State's budget is protected from budget cuts. Is any effort from legislators addressing or eliminating parts of those protected budget line items that are not really essential, or modifying them in any way?
I don't serve on the Appropriations Committee, but I do know the folks that, from what I can understand, is the Appropriations Committee has been taking a look. There's been some outreaches. I think education comes to mind. Is there's been a huge increase in education spending, and I know folks have reached out to various school districts to say, hey, because schools are shut down, so have you saved any money? Is there some way to maybe claw back some of that? But those are very preliminary discussions and very sensitive. And I actually asked some school districts in my district. Some of them have saved, they've saved some money, but they probably aren't going to offer to take, have that money get clawed back. So those are going to be some really tough discussions.
Yeah, we've actually had some discussion being on the Education Committee and working with OSPI and the different unions and stuff. We've been talking to the unions about potential ramifications about teacher wages, about what programs are going to get cut if need be. So those discussions are happening right now. Again, it's all very preliminary because we don't know how much we're going to be in the hole. And when June 17th comes around, we'll kind of know where we sit. Then we can have more real discussions.
Well, time has just flown by. We're just about out of time. Do you want to take 30 seconds or so for a final comment? We'll start with you, Representative Chapman.
Yeah, thanks for everyone. Really appreciate everyone who's participated. I guess I'm going to follow up with the Seattle Times. It'd be, so this is an aspirational goal, but what I'd like to see is a bipartisan call for a special session and a bipartisan budget amendment. And I think we can do it. And I think if we did that, that would send a loud message to the state of Washington from both east and west and rural and urban. We're all in this together. We understand what you all have just went through. Now we're going through it. But I'd love to see, there's 98 House members. I mean, I'd love to see a 98-0 vote, but that's not going to, that'd be probably not going to happen. But, why can't we get 65 or 70 votes on a bipartisan budget amendment that actually cuts spending, which should be something that, but makes the necessary reductions to put our state on solid fiscal footing. And then all of us can say we work together. And isn't that what the public wants right now? I think that, from what I hear, people are so sick and tired of the partisanship, both at the federal and the state level. They don't like it. They're done with it. And I think this is a great challenge for those of us who still believe in working with our friends on the other side of the aisle. And I'd love, that's what I'm about.
Representative Ybarra, some closing remarks?
Sure. I think as we go through this COVID virus thing, I'm kind of going into the direction where at the beginning, the governor was running all the rules, closing everything up. But I think now it's time for him to let the counties do it all. I think that the counties are in the know. The county know their differences. I don't live in Clackamas County. I don't live in King County. Their issues are different than mine. So I think we have to let the county make the decisions for the county. And if the state government needs to be involved a little bit, yes, but not to a large extent. We need to let the counties do things. And the reason I say that is because I don't know if you're very familiar with H-2A workers. They're temporary workers that get flown in from Mexico. We've got thousands of them around in Quincy. The way they work, they live on the farms. And what happened to Quincy, one of the issues was they could bust into Quincy, the grocery stores. Well, they get off work at 5 o'clock on Thursdays, go to the banks, inundate the banks, hundreds of people that don't speak English. They can't read signs that says, stay 6 feet away. They're not wearing masks. And that really increased the amount of COVID we had until we fixed it, until we had people, our clinics and hospitals, people that spoke Spanish to introduce those rules to these guys. So those are the really unique things that happen in these small little counties that people are so unaware of, but so that's why I think we should just keep it at the county level. My county is so different than Mike's, and every county is different. So I think we let the counties start taking over.
Mark, any final comments as Center for Small Business Director?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Representative Chapman and Ybarra for joining us today and giving us your insight into what's going on in your districts. I think, it's important at the beginning that we got together and we assessed where things were at, and most folks agreed that we needed to take things cautiously. But now, as Representative Ybarra said, it's time for the counties to sort of run the show. I think the state needs to take its hands off and relax as many rules as it can to allow our small businesses and folks to get back to work. Our counties also can control our property tax relief or deferrals for homeowners that are struggling as well. So everything we can do there to help is super important to get everyone back to work safely, and we need to get this thing rolling again. So I'm excited to see where Washingtonians will take our state in the next 6 months. We're a resourceful bunch, and I know our representation in Olympia will do what they can for their districts to make that happen.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for watching. I hope you will sign up for next week's special virtual solution series from Washington Policy Center. Topic will be, does science matter to policymakers anymore? You can register for that event at washingtonpolicy.org. Thank you so much for watching us. We hope you will check in on our blog and our webpage and read our research at washingtonpolicy.org.